All right, we're moving on to activity data report, and the man in the back, which is John Passarella, will you please step up and talk to us about it?
Yes, sir.
You have your shoes on, John?
Yes, sir.
All right.
They're not my dress-up shoes. I would like to begin first, though I can't take credit for it. I appreciate the comment. My assistant, Ms. Molo, played an integral role in the success of the ceremony. She did an outstanding job, especially with her, the amount of time she's been on the job, as well as Ms. Bilesma's assistant, Ms. Kennedy, Ms. Smetana, Dave Sibley, Neil Dugetti, Assistant Dean. All those individuals did an outstanding job behind the scenes. Without them, it wouldn't have happened. And I must acknowledge Aramark, the zoo police, and the local police departments for all their assistance and the staff members. I appreciate you acknowledging me, but there was so many people involved, and those people need to take credit. It's a team effort, and it really showed. I agree with you. It was one of the most outstanding ceremonies I've been a part of. With all that being said, I'm here for Pay to Participate. We've had many meetings. I've sat with Mr. Ostro, athletic director, whose program is steps ahead of us as far as experience with the impact Pay to Participate has had within his program. Unfortunately, for the activities component of student involvement, we've only had a year to really kind of collect data that is driven with the same the fees associated with it. It's as simple as that. If you look at the printout you have in front of you that shows the participants over the last 3 years, and then the money we've collected and the 400 still outstanding, which I believe may not be inaccurate and may be less now, and I'll make sure that is a current document. At the time this was put together, the last bit of information was as accurate as the R Drive website is. So when I look at this, as we all should, you take it with a grain of salt in the sense you're trying to figure out why there's an impact. It's difficult sometimes to figure out whether or not, in this case, with these numbers, are the students who are not participating here also participating in athletics? Is it overwhelming for parents to possibly be having a child make a decision on whether or not to participate in an activity, and then multiple or even individual sports? So that data we haven't yet mirrored. We haven't, or I should say, created a marriage between the athletic department and our department to see if there is a reason why kids aren't participating as the numbers indicate. Mr. Ostro and I have sat together, and though he has begun to create the questionnaire, he's tweaking it a little bit to impact the questions we need to have answered, in my opinion at least, and regarding activities to see why the numbers have dropped. Even if you look at if you go back 3 years, you can see in some cases the numbers were, up in some cases, for example, shenanigans, and then dropped. It's really difficult to figure out whether or not it's due to the fees associated with this, and which may be the case. It's just difficult to tell at this moment.
John, the 12-13 participants, even though the ones with the no charge, even that number seems to take a drop.
Yeah, it's
from 11,
really
12.
frustrating, to figure it out. What I'm going to do next year with the sponsors is try to, first off, the collection of the money was really a struggle for the sponsors initially, as was the case for the athletic department probably, and coaches when you initially implement that. They're just not used to that. And so that, from my perspective, was something that I drove hard. My numbers are more manageable than the athletic department, obviously, to go about collecting that. But there was something that you look at and you try to figure out why. Is it just kids are just backing away from it? Because, like you said, you go over the 2-year period from 10-11 to 12-13, it's greater than 50%. You go from 173 to 88. So it's really difficult to tell. Now, mind you, the 11-12 year, we didn't have the musical, but you still have a significant drop in participation. Don't know why that's the case. And needless to say, as you look at the numbers on the lower portion where the activities, for the $100, it's the same thing.
So the recommendation that Ms. Bilesma or I should say Pam and Ms. Bilesma and Mr. McGinnis and myself have talked about, we've done 2 full years of Pay to Participate, and I know we're going to talk about that next with athletics. This was really the first year We implemented this with clubs and activities. This was bringing back some of the things that were cut or eliminated. And so what we're recommending is to maybe hold constant for one more year on these, just to have a 2-year snapshot of how things are going with these numbers.
I would agree with that.
Can we also
I know it's a
look
board
at-
decision, but I really would.
Can we also look like for Orchesis where you have event, you're all moving up towards an event, a major event there where maybe you play with the program book more, that you're generating more money? Using that as a funding apparatus to maybe help.
I'm
Explain yourself, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
explain it. I don't.
So Orchesis, you have the big Orchesis event,
Sure.
where do we charge for that or we not charge for that?
Well, what we did with a lot of these groups though is we eliminated their district account,
Okay,
like with the musical, and so we just pay the fees or the stipends, and then they use their gate monies to help, and their program monies to help offset costumes and sets
Okay.
and bill rights, and so they're kind of self-sufficient that way.
all right.
Before, we used to collect the ticket money, and then we used to give them
Right.
an expense account.
Right.
Okay.
Do, a question, do we monitor the students who are not participating in anything?
Well, in a sense, monitor to look for.
To find out, yeah,
No,
to see if
that's
there's
what
an
we were
interest
discussing.
for those that are not participating, because people who are participating tend to participate, you know, but what about those students who are not participating in anything, to find an interest, to try to encourage them to, and what is, if there was a reason why they're not
I
participating?
would imagine that the counselors would know what their students are participating in or not, and whether they're involved in outside, you know, some students aren't involved here, but they might be involved in church or in community, or if they're not involved in anything, because they meet with their counselor multiple times, and they usually, I'm getting a nod from the counselor out there, so they usually would know why they're not and try and get them involved, but, yeah.
It's a good question. Because the fact is, we know, and it's been repeated over and over in many different ways, those involved are invested in the school and on, and it has impact across the board. And we as, and in my position specifically, the activities director overseeing these groups, you know, when I spoke to the sponsors, they really didn't have a concrete reason as to why their numbers may have dropped. It was just something you're trying to gather, you know, realizing, okay, could it have been this, could it have been that, but nothing solid. And in some cases with some students, they're just gonna be disengaged. They're here for just the purpose of, you know, in some cases, and there's just different percentages of why, whether it's just to get their education, move on, and just not invested in the school for whatever reason, maybe never have been, or just, you know, there's outside organizations, whether it's travel, sporting groups, or it could be religious, or any sort of group. Or in some cases, it's kids having to work and having to give up because of the economy. I've had students actually say that to me, you know, that were involved. So there's a little bit of everything, but it'd be interesting if we could somehow gather that information from those students. That'll be a challenge
And
this
also
year.
some of the clubs that kids were involved in are gone. And,
Yeah.
you know, some of them were kind of like Ultimate Frisbee Auto Club. They catered to a student that might not be
Fishing
involved.
club wasn't.
Fishing
yes,
club
it's
that
trying
might
to
not
bring it
have,
back, but
yeah, they might not have been involved in something else that might have been their club, so, you know, we'd have to ask.
That leads to my question, which was, I see there a couple have been brought back. Did you just mention that the fishing club is?
Fishing club, I received information from Ms. Bilesma of a private donor
Okay.
who is funding that. I have a list in I think right here, potentially. I may have it with me, I may not. It's in my other documents. Of the groups the clubs that have, over the years, disappeared, you know, faded off the charts
They are on
for
the- they are on the
participation
chart,
and
yeah.
things of that nature. But yeah, there's a handful that kids were involved with.
Well, there's some that appear to be, at least the last year before they were eliminated, have been at least fairly popular, and I'm just wondering if there's been some discussion about trying to find ways to bring them back. I'm sure there has, but I'm obviously new to the board.
I believe a lot of those clubs, Mr. Jefferson, were eliminated because just the overall, the stipends that the district had to pay, you know, that was an expenditure. And I was not here when this first set of clubs was cut. I think this was at the conclusion of Pam's first year. But some of the rationale was, there were other clubs being offered where those similar students or similar activities could be done in different clubs.
Or opportunities educationally
Yeah.
where they
Or
would
in a
get that exposure,
classroom, right.
not just a club. It was a difficult process, and there wasn't an easy task that occurred as far as eliminating clubs. But
Any
if you-
questions for John?
I have a couple questions. Obviously, like you said, John, there's reasons things go up and down, but, you know, you can make a little broad general. The ones that people have to pay for tended to drop, except we added back the math team with 34 members. That was a big change in the speech. So we added 2 clubs there, but apparently people were willing to pay for it. But on the, I was looking at the ones where the students don't have to pay. And, you know, there's 3 that seem to have significant increases, which were the Student Association, which is good, and the Clarion, and the Rouser. So, you know, but on a couple of the other that we had discussions with Dr. Skinkus and Ms. Filesma, you know, why they would be considered cultural. Some of them, like the African American Association for Students for Tolerance and the RBGSA, they all had pretty significant drops in participation, even though one of the reasons we wanted to not have a charge for that is because we felt there was a special need to. That one I'd ask, and the other one is it typical for the National Honor Society to have such great fluctuation in a number of students going like between the 3 years that we have? Where we went from 46 to 105 and back down to 81, is that typical?
Well, it depends on the group of students, how many are eligible and how many follow through and actually do apply. There was a decision to increase the numbers of acceptance, and it actually has become a very popular group to be a part because they do so many high exposure activities in the building where I think more kids are following through and actually applying. So, you know, it really depends. There's a faculty group and they look through the applications, and so they if they're filled out appropriately and, you know, those kids get in. It's usually the ones that aren't complete or whatever that most everybody who applies usually makes it in. So it can fluctuate on how many apply. But as far as the other groups, they kind of, you'll see ebbs and flows at most schools like this, and it tends to do with strong leaders who just graduate. You know, we just had, in the 2 groups you mentioned, the African American Culture Association and the RBGSA, we just had 2 strong groups of seniors in those that exited, and there was a leadership vacuum, and the clubs just kind of started to dwindle, and they're trying to build them back up again. So that can sometimes happen.
That would be something that OLIS has gone up, and you had the young lady who was the president of OLIS who came and spoke. She was quite an impressive speaker, so she's probably one of the leaders of that group.
Yeah, exactly.
We had a real strong individual in the African American Cultural Association sponsor in Mr. London, a real solid figure, male role model, and Ms. Chaika, who's known throughout the building with kids and really embedded in the culture of the school. Both struggled with participation, and they reached out in many ways to the point where they sat in with meetings with me, numerous meetings throughout the year as we looked at enrollment just dropping, and struggled with why, to the point where right now the recommendation will be to eliminate that group for next year and put it on pause with hopefully to regenerate some life and bring it back, because they felt that it wasn't worth having because of what the students involved were expecting from the group. It was a real struggle. And I've tasked Mr. London this summer to reach out voluntarily to try to get a hold of some information from other schools on how they have run their programs, you know, and to see if he can gather something. There may be nothing out there, but they both struggled with that. And if you ever had a conversation with Mr. London, you'll see a solid individual who he's inviting, he's embracing, and there's a presence about him. And I thought by bringing him on with Ms. Chaika, who had done it before, and look, she had 20 students when she ran it alone, and that there would really be an influx of students that's just dying to get in, and it just didn't occur. We just struggle with that, to the point where they both are recommending that the group not be in place next year.
You know, the other thing that's tough is like with the speech and forensics, you know, we've had 8 students, now hopefully the sponsor can grow that, but we've had 8 students participate this year for $800. And yet there's been a request for an assistant speech coach, because when you go to these competitions, what happens a lot of time is they break the contestants into, there's 2 or 3 different kinds of speeches. So you have to have judges and sponsors on different,
It's a lot of one-on-one almost.
yeah, different levels. So, you know, we could, you know, we're looking at, okay, do we fund another assistant speech coach for 8 students where we have, you know, barely enough to run the club, or even though they're doing a pay to participate?
You know, and to go back to Mr. Gritchen's question, I believe it was, or Mr. Walsh, is in some cases, the numbers dropped because students previously would be part of a group knowing they'd never make it through competition, or to competition, let alone through it, just to get the experience, as to grow with the group throughout the years. So the next question would be, is if you look at these numbers, how many are freshmen, how many are sophomores, and juniors, and seniors? Because the parent isn't gonna pay for that child, the average parent who might be struggling, to just participate at a competitive group when they know their child's never gonna make it that far. And that is the way the group is almost set up, because they're all not gonna make it to competition. So that could play a role in some of our dropping in numbers. We're gonna look at and try to gather as much data as we can next year to try to get a handle on as to why, and I'm gonna reach to the sponsors.
And that has a
this
cumulative
summer.
impact
Oh,
too,
across the
because
board.
these 8 are connected to the 18 you saw before. They're coming
Exactly.
back, but you're not getting the
Exactly.
younger kids trying it and starting, so it's difficult to build a team then.
Well, like,
So-
I think Mr. Monty brought up that example with the chess team.
Exactly the same.
You know, he used to have 25, 27 kids sitting in his room playing chess, but they only take like 10 boards on competition, or 8 boards on competition.
It's real tight.
So now, for a kid to pay $100 and never really participate in a competition,
It's an investment, if they can look long-term, is worth it, but it's difficult to ask of parents sometimes. So that's where our struggles are, I believe, some of them.
I think we look at it for 1 more year and then see how we're doing financially, and see how if there's a different approach similar to what we're going to discuss tonight with athletics.
But during that year too, we like you to look at people that were in the group before that aren't in a group now, what's the reason why? And also where they've been down, is it a sponsor problem, or is it a sponsor problem that doesn't, it's hard for them to motivate to get kids in there, or is it something we need to look at, so? Okay. Any other questions for John? All right, thank you, John.
Thanks.